pressure inside the UFC has never been higher. Fighters are banding together, demanding better pay and more respect. And Dana White is pushing back hard.
Listen, if you don't like how we run our business, go start your own.
This fight isn't just about money. It's about power, control, and what happens when a billion-dollar company is forced to answer to the people who risk their lives inside the cage. From record-breaking TV deals.
Paramount Plus will be the new exclusive home for the UFC. It's the start of a 7-year deal or $7.7 billion.
To scandals, FBI investigations, and fighters speaking out like never before. The situation is getting ugly, fast. In this video, the whole thing gets broken down. Who's really winning, who's getting left behind, and why 2025 might be the year UFC fighters finally say, enough. The billion-dollar deal that changed everything. In August 2025, the landscape of mixed martial arts changed forever. The UFC finalized a $7.7 billion partnership with Paramount Global, a 7-year deal averaging $1.1 billion annually. The agreement marked a decisive shift away from the pay-per-view model that had defined the sport since 2019, signaling a new era in how the UFC reaches audiences and generates revenue. For the promotion, it was a historic business triumph. But for the fighters, it raised new questions about who really benefits from all that money. To understand the full scope of this deal, it's not enough to look at the numbers. The agreement isn't just a media partnership. It's a total consolidation of UFC content under one platform. Every major event, from 12 numbered cards and 12 fight nights to 30 additional programs, will now stream exclusively on Paramount Plus, with select headline bouts simulcast on CBS for national television audiences. The deal is managed by TKO Group Holdings, the parent company formed through the 2023 merger with Endeavor. It marks a deliberate shift toward broader accessibility, moving away from ESPN's narrower pay-per-view model and targeting a more diverse global audience. For Dana White, this moment signified a personal and professional triumph, a validation of 2 decades spent turning the UFC from a niche cable product into a global brand. As media analyst Ariel Helwani noted, the implications of this deal were massive, and the beneficiaries were already coming into focus.
Obviously, the first would be Paramount, the new Paramount Skydance. David Ellison, the 42-year-old son of the media mogul, Larry Ellison. He's got this company, Skydance. They take over Paramount.
When Dana White sat down for interviews after the announcement, you could feel the pride in his voice. To him, this deal was a victory lap, a moment that proved the UFC had gone from outlaw brawls in dimly lit arenas to the global stage of primetime television. On Barstool's Pardon My Take, just 2 days after the news broke, he called the deal incredible for the fighters, promising not only more exposure, but more money. He claimed the new era would bring higher fighter pay and bigger incentives, highlighting the fan favorite Performance of the Night bonuses, those legendary $50,000 rewards that have been part of the UFC since 2005. The low-hanging fruit that's easy to answer. The bonuses are obviously going up, White declared, hinting at millions in new payouts across the roster. To the public, it sounded like a celebration, a billion-dollar breakthrough. But beneath the smiles and sound bites, there was a very different conversation brewing, one about who truly benefits when the UFC cashes in. And that's where things start to get complicated. And this is where Helwani's analysis cuts straight to the heart of the matter.
The last entity, of course, are the fighters. And to me, they're the big losers here. They're the big losers not because, the viewership gets affected. That remains to be seen. If you're behind less of a paywall, you're seen by more people, that's probably a win.
When you strip away the press releases and the billion-dollar headlines, the truth behind this deal starts to look painfully familiar. It's the same story the UFC has told for years. The company grows richer, but the fighters don't. From $600 million in 2019 to over $1.3 billion by 2024, the promotion's revenue had doubled. Yet fighters still stuck earning roughly 18 to 20% of that total, barely a fraction of what athletes in other major leagues take home. In the NBA, players pull in nearly half of all revenue. In the UFC, they're lucky to see a fifth. That's the gap fueling the anger behind this new uprising. Even icons of the sport began speaking out. Georges St-Pierre, a Hall of Famer and longtime critic of the system, called the deal terrible for leverage. He warned that it stripped fighters of their most valuable bargaining chip, pay-per-view points, the one place they could share in the company's success. Chris Weidman, the former middleweight champion, went further. He demanded sustainable, full-time pay, a model that would finally treat fighters as employees, not gig workers chasing bonuses to survive. The backlash wasn't limited to fighters. On X, the platform once called Twitter, the fan base was split in half. Dana White's interview clips celebrating the Paramount deal drew thousands of likes, but the replies told a very different story. Comments like, "Bonuses up? Cool. But base pay's still slave wages." Cut through the noise. Then came the spark that set the whole debate ablaze. A leaked fighter payslip showing a main event winner taking home just $20,000 after taxes. The post exploded, racking up over 8,000 engagements, with fans calling out the UFC's $12 billion valuation and the fighter's bare minimum earnings. It was raw, public, and ugly. And for the first time in a long time, the outrage wasn't just coming from the outside, it was coming from within the cage. White's response followed a familiar pattern, one fans had seen countless times before. That signature East Coast bluntness, that mix of swagger and defiance that made him both admired and despised, was back in full force. Whenever the topic of fighter pay came up, Dana didn't flinch. He fired back. To him, the criticism wasn't coming from people who cared about fighters. It was coming from outsiders, journalists, influencers, even YouTubers who had never built an empire, never signed a check, never stepped into an octagon. He saw it all as noise from people who didn't understand the business he'd spent decades building. This time was no different. White didn't just defend the UFC's pay model, he dared anyone to challenge it. He doubled down on what he calls the fair spread philosophy, the belief that the UFC rewards the athletes who sell tickets, who make headlines, who bring eyes to the brand. In his mind, that was how capitalism worked. You eat what you earn. He painted the UFC not as a villain, but as a machine that gave fighters global fame, world-class facilities, and opportunities no other promotion could offer. And if someone wasn't happy, his message was simple: go start your own company. And then came his fiery defense, the moment that summed up everything about Dana White's stance on fighter pay.
People like to push the buttons and talk about fighter pay, and you don't ever see us coming out and talking about it or doing whatever, because I don't give a shit. When I got 20-something-year-old Jake Paul, a fucking YouTuber, talking about fighter pay, or these other guys on the internet, we know what the hell we're doing over here. And at the end of the day, my philosophy is always this: it's nobody's fucking business what these fighters are making. None of these guys are under some type of gag order in their contract. Any fighter on the roster can come out and tell you guys what they make.
It was classic Dana, loud, confident, and unyielding. The tone wasn't defensive, it was dominating. He wasn't just answering critics, he was putting them in their place. To him, the UFC's success was the ultimate justification. The brand was thriving, pay-per-view numbers were climbing, and the sport had gone mainstream. As far as White was concerned, that was proof his system worked, and anyone questioning it just didn't get it. White pointed to over $300 million in total fighter payouts for 2024 as proof that progress was being made. In his eyes, the system worked. The money was flowing, the stars were shining, and the fighters who delivered got rewarded. He contrasted the UFC's balance model against boxing's star-driven chaos, where a handful of big names took home fortunes while everyone else scraped by. When reporters pressed him about the massive Paramount windfall, Dana's response was as vague as it was familiar. "It's gonna be good." That was it. No details, no numbers, just that trademark confidence that said, "Trust me." To some, it sounded reassuring. To others, it sounded like a man dodging the question. By October, though, things started to shift, at least on paper. UFC COO Hunter Campbell revealed that the company was already in the process of renegotiating contracts, specifically for fighters who had earned pay-per-view points under the old model. With the Paramount deal effectively dismantling that system, the UFC needed a new way to keep its biggest names happy. But outside the boardrooms, the pressure was reaching a boiling point. Across social media, forums, and podcasts, the fighter community was no longer whispering. They were roaring. Petitions on Change.org surged past 50,000 signatures, demanding something real: transparent contracts, fairer revenue splits, health insurance, and the end of silence around pay. The movement wasn't just online anymore. It was cultural. Fighters were starting to speak in unison, and that terrified the brass. And that's when Dana White snapped. In an August 18th YouTube rant ahead of UFC 318, he went off on his critics. His voice was sharp, his tone venomous. He called talk of a fighters union a disaster, warning that it would kill the golden goose. He pointed to Conor McGregor's 9-figure fortune as proof that opportunity existed for anyone willing to earn it. "You want big money?" he implied. "Be a star, sell fights, build your brand." But that argument didn't land the way it used to, because everyone knew McGregor was the exception, not the rule. For every fighter who made millions, there were dozens stuck on the undercard, taking home $10,000 to show and $10,000 to win, barely covering their training expenses. Fighters with broken bones, concussions, and hospital bills were being told to market themselves better. The contrast was becoming impossible to ignore. Dana's empire had never looked stronger, but inside the octagon, the people who built it were starting to crack. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.